Have you ever looked at the $38 trillion US national debt and thought, how on earth will that ever get paid off? The number is so staggering it feels impossible, like a family trying to pay off a mortgage the size of a small country. But here's the secret. The US government isn't paying it off like a mortgage, and that's the first illusion you need to drop if you want to understand how this massive debt can be erased without a single vote in Congress. The real mechanism isn't about writing a check, it's about something far more subtle and powerful: monetary debasement. It works quietly through inflation, asset price inflation, and the simple passage of time. When the Federal Reserve expands the money supply, whether through quantitative easing, emergency lending, or other forms of balance sheet support, it's not just printing money out of thin air, it's reducing the real purchasing power of every single dollar that already exists. Think of it this way. The debt itself doesn't just vanish. It shrinks relative to the size of the economy and the total amount of money in circulation. If the economy's nominal GDP grows because prices are rising everywhere, then that fixed pile of debt becomes much easier to handle in real terms. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's simple arithmetic. The $38 trillion figure stays the same, but the value of each of those dollars goes down. But here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit dangerous. It's all about distribution. Who benefits when new money is created, and who ends up paying the bill later on? This brings us to the Cantillon Effect, probably the most important economic concept that mainstream financial media almost never talks about. The Cantillon Effect explains that money is not neutral. Its impact depends entirely on who gets it first. Those closest to the money printer, think big banks, large financial institutions, the government itself, and major asset owners, they receive the newly created money before prices across the economy have had a chance to rise. They get to go on a shopping spree, buying up assets like stocks and real estate at yesterday's prices. By the time this new money trickles down to the rest of us, if it ever really does, it's too late. By the time our wages finally adjust, the cost of everything, housing, stocks, food, energy, healthcare, education, has already shot up. The result is a silent tax on anyone who works for a living or tries to save money. And at the same time, it's a massive subsidy for those who use leverage and speculation. This is how the national debt is being paid off by you. You won't see a line item for it on your tax bill. You'll feel it at the grocery store checkout. You'll feel it when you pay your rent or your insurance premiums. And you'll definitely feel it when you realize your paycheck doesn't go as far as it used to because your real wages are shrinking. And make no mistake, this isn't some accidental byproduct of economic policy. Since the financial crisis of 2008, the United States has deliberately chosen a policy known as financial repression. The goal is to keep interest rates below the rate of inflation. Why? Because when you do that, the biggest borrower in the world, the government, wins. Its debt becomes cheaper to service in real terms. And who loses? Savers. Anyone with money in a savings account is effectively losing purchasing power every single day. This reality completely shatters the old myths of personal finance, especially the classic 60-40 portfolio. For decades, investors were told that a simple mix of 60% stocks and 40% bonds was the key to financial security. Stocks were for growth, and bonds were for safety. It was a beautiful, balanced framework. But that model only worked under a specific set of conditions: falling interest rates, stable inflation, and central banks that were seen as credible and reliable. We are no longer in that world. We're in an era of structurally high debt, persistent government deficits, and a complete political unwillingness to cut spending. In this new environment, the old rules don't apply. When inflation starts to rise, what happens to those safe bonds? Their value falls. And when the central bank has to raise interest rates to fight that inflation, what happens to stocks? They get repriced downwards. Suddenly, the things that were supposed to be uncorrelated start moving in the same direction, down. The correlations converge toward one, and the diversification you thought you had disappears just when you need it most. We all saw the social consequences of this play out in what was called the K-shaped recovery. After 2020, the letter K perfectly illustrates the divergence. One line goes up, and the other goes down. Asset owners, people who owned stocks, real estate, and private equity, saw their wealth rebound aggressively and soar to new highs. Meanwhile, wage earners and small savers were left on the downward slope, their financial situations getting worse. Just look at the data since 2020. Equities and housing prices went on a historic run. At the same time, real wages, what you can actually buy with your paycheck, lagged behind inflation for years. That growing gap between the rich and everyone else isn't a temporary glitch in the system. It's a feature. It's the direct result of a system designed to inflate away its obligations, rather than honestly confront them. So the national debt is being paid. But it's not being paid by politicians making tough choices. It's being paid by the dilution of your savings and the erosion of your wages. It's a transfer of wealth, happening silently every single day. If this analysis is already challenging what you've been told about how the economy works, that's a good thing. It means you're starting to see behind the curtain. Understanding this mechanism is the crucial difference between being confused and frustrated by rising prices, and recognizing who is actually footing the bill for the nation's debt. Thanks for watching. If you found this valuable, please subscribe to the channel and leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. So, where is all of this heading? Systems don't just drift randomly, they move towards their limits, their constraints. As national debt continues to skyrocket and inflation becomes a tougher beast to tame, the people in charge face a massive dilemma. Do they let interest rates rise, which could trigger a wave of bankruptcies across governments, banks, and the entire asset market? Or do they keep rates artificially low and just accept that the value of our money will be slowly eroded? If you look at history, deeply indebted nations almost always choose the second option, financial repression. This is where the conversation about central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, gets really interesting. This isn't some far-off sci-fi concept anymore. Central banks all over the world are actively discussing and developing them. On the surface, a digital dollar is pitched as a simple modernization project, making payments faster, smoother, and bringing more people into the financial system. But when you look at the underlying structure, you realize it enables something that physical cash can't: programmable money. Think about it. With a CBDC, a central bank could directly apply interest rates to the money sitting in your account. They could set negative rates, essentially charging you a fee for saving money, to push you to spend it. They could create rules that incentivize or discourage certain types of purchases. They could even implement capital controls with the flip of a switch, stopping money from leaving the country. In a world drowning in debt, this is a powerful tool. Negative real interest rates, where inflation is higher than the interest you earn, aren't a mistake. They're the intended solution. Policymakers need inflation to outpace yields to slowly chip away at the real value of their massive debts. To make that work, they have to stop savers from pulling their money out and running to other assets. Now, this doesn't automatically mean that CBDCs are a one-way ticket to a dystopian future, but it does mean that the toolkit available to policymakers expands dramatically. When you combine this with the steady decline of physical cash, it significantly reduces our financial options and our freedom. It makes it harder to opt out of the system. At the very same time, the traditional safe havens that people have relied on for generations are coming under immense pressure. Government bonds, once the bedrock of a conservative portfolio, lose their real value when inflation is high. The stock market becomes a roller coaster as interest rate expectations swing back and forth. Real estate is already facing huge affordability issues, not to mention the growing political risks like new taxes or regulations. This is precisely why you're seeing a surge of interest in hard assets, things like commodities and, of course, monetary metals like gold and silver. These are assets that have a limited finite supply and don't carry counterparty risk. They can't be printed into existence by a central bank. They represent a tangible store of value outside the traditional financial system. Let's be clear, the system isn't going to collapse tomorrow morning, but it is undeniably in a state of transition. Quietly, behind the scenes, the United States is choosing the path of inflation over the path of austerity. Why? Because austerity, slashing government spending and raising taxes, is political suicide. So instead of paying back the debt, the strategy is to manage it through dilution, by devaluing the currency it's measured in. The great irony in all of this is that the entire strategy hinges on trust. They need you to trust that inflation will just be temporary. They need you to trust that our institutions will always act in the public's best interest. They need you to trust that one day you'll be able to earn a decent, positive real return on your savings again. But history paints a very different picture. Empires rarely default on their debts outright. They just debase their currency until the debt becomes manageable. Understanding these mechanics doesn't mean you need to panic, but it does require a healthy dose of realism. The goal of this video isn't to give you financial advice or tell you what to buy or sell. It's to explain the mechanics of what's happening so that you can think for yourself, connect the dots, and make your own informed decisions. That staggering national debt figure you see on the news, it's not just an abstract number, it's a direct claim on your future purchasing power. And every single time the money supply expands faster than the real economy grows, that claim is settled. It's settled by reducing what each dollar you hold can actually buy. That's the real secret. That's how a mind-boggling number like $38 trillion gets erased without ever officially being erased. The cost is quietly paid by everyone through the slow and steady erosion of their wealth. It shows up in the price of your groceries, your gas, your rent, everywhere except the one place most people are told to look. Thanks for watching, and if you found this valuable, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world.